so much for the introduction, Anika. So I'll just jump right to it because we've got limited time. The session that we'll be discussing today is on rebuttal. And before I obviously go ahead and like talk about this in more detail, the thing that I just want to highlight is there is no like one formula to kind of go ahead and like develop and deliver very good rebuttal in itself. But there's obviously different frameworks and um, like different lessons that you can learn from experience, from like practicing it out that helps you. But the focus of the session would be on two things. The first would be to understand some of the theory that underpins like most common forms of rebuttal. And the second would be to ensure that um, we go ahead and attempt to do some level of rebuttal, looking at some speeches in itself. And the reason why that's specifically important is obviously because um, the rebuttal has two elements to it, which makes it effective. The first element is the degree to which it is able to take down the constructive argument of the other team. And the second is the preciseness of the time that you can deliver the rebuttal in. Because as we all know, debating is a time bound sport. If we had like more than 7 minutes to deliver our speeches, we would all be receiving a lot more credit in terms of speaker points, in terms of other abilities to like do a lot more things. But at the end of the day, debating allows you to speak for 7 minutes and like 15 seconds of praise if that's something that you want to consider necessarily. But in this instance, you need to know that time is it's a resource, and a resource that you should utilize carefully. So obviously your rebuttal needs to be efficient in terms of the time, as well as the first thing, go ahead and like ensure it engages effectively with the other team's argument. Okay, so then the question quite simply that begets us is, what exactly is rebuttal? Um, I mean, from the essence of the word in itself, is it's taking down or it's attempting to take down a constructive piece of argument that the other team has provided. Okay. Um, and what we'll first start with is what we consider to be the common form of a structure for a rebuttal in itself. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Then let's see. Is my screen visible to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Is the font of the letters fine, or do y'all want me to enlarge it a bit more?
Pretty much possible.
Font is good? Okay, lovely. Okay. So this module will have two parts. This is the initial part of the theory, and then we'll go into some practice. The first part is the structure of the rebuttal in itself, and the second part would be the different types of rebuttal. So a rebuttal would commonly have three parts to it. The first part would be the observation part of the rebuttal. The second part would be the explanation, and the third would be the conclusion. And obviously, it's the case that in this instance, we are only considering like um, if there is an argument, we are responding or we are rebutting it in one specific way. I'm going to explain in a bit more uh, later on, like how do we tackle nested rebuttal? Like there is multiple types of rebuttal or multiple forms of rebuttal you are using against a particular statement or against a particular constructive argument. But for now, we're just thinking about um, doing like only one kind of rebuttal to that specific argument as such. Okay, so what's the first part in terms of observation? I think this quite simply is involves two parts. It's quoting the exact material that the other team has provided that you want to rebut. That may be a statement, that may be an argument, that may be a premise, whatever it is. Maybe it's like it's an empirical fact. Whatever it is that you want to rebut, you make a quotation of it. Okay. And when I say quotation, I don't necessarily mean You copy paste everything that they said because they made an entire speech. If I have to take down an argument, I can't just repeat the entire argument from top to bottom, but rather I'd like to like summarize it in a way that conveys the key elements of the argument. So what are the often the key elements of the argument that you would want to quote? It would be things like um, the impact of the argument, or the initial premise that you are necessarily deriving the impact from. So be like the claim is, uh, I mean, this kills a lot more soldiers, and the mechanism is, well, one or two, whatever the mechanisms would be at that point of time. So it involves quoting the exact material you want to rebut and stating the kind of rebuttal that you'd want to make to it. The kinds of rebuttal is the types of rebuttal, which we'll come to in a bit. But like the most common form would just be like, oh, I feel it's empirically untrue, or I feel it's logically untrue, or um, panel, I don't think they reach the impact. So there's different forms of rebuttal, but you just want to state what it is that you're rebutting and state what is the form of rebuttal that you're employing in this initiative. If you don't do that, what ends up happening is be like, I'm going to respond to the argument on the environment. But at that point of time, like it's not clear to the adjudicator what and how you're responding to. Maybe it does become clear from the analysis or the explanation of your rebuttal, but it is not always recommended to do so, given the fact that there is large possibilities that they don't understand what you're exactly rebutting. So, in order to maintain a flow and a chain of thought and clarity in the minds of the listener in itself, you want to ensure that you follow this sort of a structure that gives rebuttals a lot more clarity. So you quote the exact material and you state the kind of rebuttal you want to make to it. It's important to be as brief as possible whilst also communicating the whole extent of logic that the other team has provided. Please don't misrepresent or skew the material. So like, don't like state their argument to be something that it isn't, because the judge has also taken notes. It's not like only you are hearing their speech and you can like skew their arguments in ways that's specifically possible. That will get highly uh, undercredited, and you will be, well, you'll be punished for it. So for example, so there's a claim that the other team has made. Perhaps they make the claim that rains are frequent in northern India. So an example of an observation would be, this government team claims that rains are super frequent in northern India. This is empirically untrue. And then you can obviously in the explanation part, there'll be a bunch of reasons why it's untrue. Um, yes, Hidden Power 2.0, what's your question?
Yeah, you said that you should not state the arguments like um, if you don't understand the whole context of the argument. In that case, what should you do in the match?
If you don't understand the argument, there's very little you can do, unfortunately, because in order to provide a rebuttal to the logic, you'd have to understand the logic yourself. Maybe if the other speaker's been unclear and that's the reason why you've not able to understand it, you could just point out to the adjudicator, be like, this is their claim, this is their logic, but and quote their logic, but it really does not make any sense. I do not understand why their logic is something that uh, logically holds true, or whatever it's the case. So maybe it's the case that you don't understand the logic because they have not been clear in the logic. And if they have not been clear in the logic, then the judge would have also not understood. But if it's the case that you want to improve your understanding of the logic in itself, so maybe hear the debate a bit more closely, practice hearing more and more speeches and debates would obviously be true. Um, the second example would be, so for example, let's assume there's a motion like, this house prefers a world without the existence of private vehicles. So what do private vehicles look like? Okay, it looks like cars, motorcycles, etc. So like uh, gov is gov is defending a world where nobody can own a motorcycle, nobody can own like a car, etc. And op is defending a world which is status quo, right? Like people can own stuff. um And there's this claim that has been made that, like, without the existence of private vehicles, without people actually owning motorcycles and cars, etc., um, we would solve climate change, pollution would reduce. That's the claim. So let's look at an example of an observation that I would make, or you would make, to that specific claim. This looks like in the second example. The opposition team claims, absent the existence of private vehicles, this would potentially solve climate change issues. What have I done? I have summarized the exact argument in a precise way. Okay. There are other, so this is a form of rebuttal. This is the observation I have, like the kind of rebuttal. Okay. There are other reasons why climate change will continue, and the reduction in private vehicles doesn't achieve a tipping point to solve any of the issues they claim. Okay. Um, does someone want to think about, like, what are these other reasons? Like, what do you think are other reasons why climate change issues um, will continue? Um, Maybe it's a big class, so I'll just answer it. It's the idea that perhaps is the case that there are other sources of climate change that occurs, like independent of people driving vehicles. This looks like big industries, big oil, fossil fuel burning, all these sort of things. Okay, and as a result of which, like, even if there is some reduction in private vehicles and vehicular exhaustion, it is not meaningful in terms of reversing the impact that is climate change as such. And there needs to be other things. So this is not wholly true as an impact, and that's the observation that you're making in this instance. Okay, the second part would be your explanation. So just involving and providing a set of reasons for why the observation is true. So for example, in this instance, I made the observation that rains is like the claim that rains is super frequent in northern India is empirically untrue. So I may be like, look, northern India has different places across which receive sporadic rainfall and seasonal rainfall. um, this is because we know from statistics that March, April, May, for example, or not March, April, May, I mean June, July, for example, has the most amount of rain, and there is obviously seasons in winter which does not receive as much amount of rain. So the claim that they're making is just empirically untrue. Okay, so that would be providing a set of reasons for why this observation that we are talking about is true. And this, mind you, is analogous to the structure of an argument. So if you're like, so we know the structure of an argument, right? Like, I presume that's the case. Um, then, like, if there's a premise, I'm like obviously proving that why the premise is true, and then I'm proving why the premise is important, right? So I provide a set of reasons. In this case, my premise is the observation, and then the explanation would be providing a set of reasons to why. So if the observation is the claim for the rebuttal, the explanation is the part robustly proving why the claim is true. And then the third would be the conclusion. So what is the conclusion? Okay. So maybe it is the case that you are responding to a full argument. And in the process of responding to a full argument, you are mitigating the argument. You're not taking it down fully, you're mitigating the extent. So you're taking down perhaps a few pieces of logic, but you're not fully taking down the argument. Then you should make it clear to the adjudicator that this rebuttal serves as mitigation to the opposition's argument, and then perhaps you can weigh your positive case versus their positive case, right? So be like, we mitigate the extent to which their positive argument exists. Here's our positive impact. Here's why our positive impact is more important than their positive impact. So that would be one form of using conclusions. The other form of using conclusion would be, um, if you take down all the key reasons why the impact holds true, then the impact won't hold true. For example, in this example that we have, okay, um, so the opposition team claims, absent the existence of private vehicles, this would potentially solve climate change issues, right? So if I give other strong reasons why climate change issues will continue, the end conclusion will be that, like, independent of whether or not, like, this continues, uh, you will not reach your end impact. Maybe you will reduce the amount of pollution, which is true. Like number of vehicles reducing reduces number of pollution, amount of pollution. But reducing the amount of pollution is meaningless because the impact that they are striving for is potentially solving climate change issues or like necessarily getting ahead in terms of any of the other Paris Accord stuff that you would necessarily have in this instance. So you would obviously want to explain the implication for your rebuttal, which is the conclusion, unless, of course, it is obvious in the observation, which in this instance it is. So you don't need to be super explicit at the end of the rebuttal as well. So yeah, this is broadly it in terms of the structure. You have an observation, you have a explanation, and you have a conclusion. Any questions? Yes, Jaya.
It's not explicitly a question, but more of a clarification. This private vehicles and climate change one rebuttal was a slippery slope fallacy, right?
Slippery slope in what sense?
As in that you can't prove that just because pollution reduces because of less private vehicles, the whole problem of climate change also. That's a
Yeah, that's the implication itself. You're right about it.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
No worries. So yeah, I mean, as I explained over here, you all obviously you do some meta debate commentary, which quite simply means explaining the significance of making the rebuttal in itself and how it affects the debate. Cool. So what are the different types of rebuttal? Here's where it gets a bit interesting. There are five different forms of rebuttal that you can primarily employ. Obviously, there are a lot of different variants of how you use this rebuttal in itself, which is something that we will also discuss. The first form of it is the most strongest form of rebuttal, which is called off clash. So, when an argument is fully irrelevant to the motion, and in other words, even if we concede the argument, you won't lose the debate. This is considered to be an off clash argument. So, let's take that example of the private vehicle motion in itself. So this house prefers a world without the existence of like private vehicles. Okay, and on Gov, I make an argument like, oh, absent private vehicles, the sun will be more brighter in the mornings. Some dumb argument like this. Okay, uh, then you can be like, sure, like there is no real reason why the sun won't be brighter on our side as well. Okay, maybe it's the case they're talking about the Delhi pollution, but let's not think about that. But anyway, so the idea is when the argument is absolutely irrelevant to the motion, and you can fully concede it without losing the debate, call the argument off flash. So be like, panel, the claim that they make on whatever the sun being more brighter is off flash because independent of the existence of private vehicles or not the existence of private vehicles, it won't really change whether or not the sun will be brighter or less brighter in itself. And as a result of that, is off clash the debate. Okay, so it's not enough to state the argument is off clash, but you must explain why it is. The second is the most common form of rebuttal that we all use. It's just stating that something is untrue. So you may say it's logically untrue, you may say it's empirically untrue. When I say empirically untrue, I just mean that it's factually untrue. Okay. And obviously don't use factually untrue with like be like, oh, I read this some statistics in some journal in 1999 something something. Like you can't obviously quote obscure statistics in debate because debate is supposed to convince the uh, who you would consider the OIV or the ordinary intelligent voter. And this individual is someone who knows the headlines of all newspapers, but obviously does not know the depths, is not an expert in any subject. So you cannot expect them to know obscure statistics, right? So if you know things like obscure statistics or obscure facts, then it's always preferable to generalize the logic from the example or the fact or the statistic and put it as a logical reason or put it as a structural reason in this instance. Okay, so it's the most intuitive response for most speakers. They say something is true, we claim it isn't true. Okay, um, and obviously you must explain why it is untrue. It can be logically or empirically untrue. So obviously you can use this in different ways, right? So there's a initial premise, and the initial premise leads to impacts in an argument, right? So you can say maybe it's the case the initial premise is untrue. Maybe it's the case that one of the mechanisms that they provide is untrue. Maybe it's the case that um, like all the mechanisms that they say depend on some underlying premise which is untrue. So there are different ways in which you can use calling something to be untrue in itself, which will obviously form a part of your observation, and then the set of reasons for why it is untrue would be the explanation in the rebuttal structure in itself. The third would be assertion. So if other team has just stated something without giving any reason why that is true, why that statement is true, uh, then the argument is fully asserted, or the link is fully as crucial link is fully asserted. Obviously, there's a weaker response, and you shouldn't like accuse in without reason. Superficial analysis is still analysis, and you need to like respond to the logic. And what you should do is when you point out something's an assertion, say that panel, their claim is X. They give you zero reasons why it is true. It is an assertion. Then prove why it's untrue. Okay, like don't just stop over there. Like prove the reverse, prove why it's untrue as well. Okay. So combine it with the second form of the rebuttal, the statement is untrue in itself. Um, the fourth would be by this logic. And by this logic is just some rhetorical fluff that you can specifically use in debates. So you can say that, like, um, if there is something that comes after uh, using the logic, which is truly absurd, then you can use this. So it only works if what comes after by this logic is truly absurd. Okay. Um, for example, like you cannot say in this house would ban alcohol, by this logic you should also ban smoking, because like that's not a fair interpretation of how the motion works, because the motion is asking you to debate a specific policy about alcohol and not about smoking, so that rhetoric is unlikely going to be true, unlikely going to affect the debate. um, what could affect the debate? So for example, if like um so let's assume uh there's some argument that side one side makes in a this house would ban zoos debate. So opposition makes sorry government makes this argument that animals should not have rights because animals um like yeah, animals just don't feel empathy for other human beings. Animals don't understand us, and um, animals generally are apathetic to humans. So basically, the idea that they don't have empathy towards humans, right? You can say by this logic, even babies and mental health patients um, should be uh should not be cared about, because well even they can't feel the empathy, or like they also can't sense the understanding of what humans feel specifically in this instance. Okay, so um that's truly ridiculous, right? Obviously, it's the case that babies and mental health, uh, like people with special needs, uh, who cannot empathize with us or who cannot specifically understand what we are telling them, obviously we care about them and we give them rights, right? So that's not a good enough reason for why animals don't deserve rights. So you can use the logic that the other team has provided to conclude that by this logic there's something truly absurd that would be true, and that would also be a form of rhetorical rebuttal that you can use in itself. Obviously don't only use bias logic, combine it with uh, number two, statement being untrue in itself, because that's something that would kind of it paints a picture in the adjudicator's mind in terms of why the logic is trash, But then if you rebut the logic in itself, the trash logic gets rebutted as well, and it does not stand in the debate whatsoever. Okay, so use this for to help why the original logic is flawed and give a stronger response explaining this in itself. And the third just would be like a common form, which would be ours is bigger. It's quite simply analogous to weighing. It's saying that our argument or our impact is less important. Um, like the other team's impact is less important than our argument or our impact. Specifically, obviously, this is the weakest form of rebuttal because it does not take down the other team's case totally. But it's time effective. It does help you ensure that if there's a lot of mechanisms that exist, um, you're not able to take down all those mechanisms. This is something that you can specifically do. Okay, so these are five common forms of rebuttals. Any questions?
Uh, Hello. Can you please
Yes,
explain
Shreya.
assertion? Can you please explain assertion? I didn't get it actually. Please.
Yeah, yeah. So let's assume a team makes an argument. The argument is sorry, hello,
Yes.
hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, yeah, assertion is very straightforward. It's like, hello, wait, is this audible from my side?
Yes,
I hope
you're
it is.
absolutely audible.
Oh, because someone's speaking in the background, that's why I was making sure. Okay, so assertion is quite simply if the other team has not given any reasons for why the premise is true, then you can claim that the premise is an assertion. So, for example, you're responding to a team, and the team has made a, an argument. The argument goes something like this. Um, there will be a lot of humans' lives lost, okay, as a result of this policy being enacted. But there is no reason that they state why human lives will be lost. The reason is non-intuitive also. Like it's not even intuitive human lives will be lost. So say perhaps something like this private vehicles thing only. Oh, if we do not have private vehicles, a lot of or if we have private vehicles, a lot of human lives would be lost, right? So there is no real analysis they provide. So you can be like, the claim the other team makes that if you have private vehicles, then this causes loss of life is an assertion. They have no analysis to it. And then you can club it with the statement being untrue, the second form of rebuttal, and be like, this is also untrue because of XYZ reason. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay. Okay. I got it. Thanks.
Yes, Hin Power.
Yes, I want to ask, like, how do you take down a very good argument made by the other side of the house with many mechanisms, and these are strong mechanisms with good analysis? How do you take down these types of arguments?
I mean, if there are many mechanisms, the most, yeah, the most, hello, yeah, okay. So if there are many mechanisms, sorry, I'll just go and speak ahead. Okay, so if there are many mechanisms, um, one of the ways obviously is like you take down each of those individual mechanisms, you prove them to be untrue. But a more cost effective way would be to do either of three things if it's possible. So one of the things you can do is you can flip the impact of the argument. Okay, so you can say that so if they have an impact and they claim the impact is good, you can claim the impact is not good. It's bad, in fact. Okay, so for example, there's a claim about I don't know, like uh, change in weather cycles for North Delhi, for example. Like this leads to change in weather cycles. And they're like, oh, this is like super good because now Delhi receives more rain and this is good for farmers. Okay. I'm like, I can flip the argument and I can be like, no, 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 it's bad because this may cause, like, I don't know, flooding, for example, and like a lot of rain is just bad. So this would be the end conclusion for a series of mechanisms and would be a way in which you don't respond to any of the mechanisms, you just flip the end impact in itself. The second would be weighing. You weigh why your end impact is more important than the other team's end impact. And the third would be quite simply claiming it's off flash if it is off flash. So either of these three possibilities exist, but if you want to purely do direct rebuttal, there is no other way apart from engaging with the mechanisms that they have specifically provided. Unless, of course, you can find a common premise that underlinks all those mechanisms and prove that premise to be untrue.
I have a follow-up.
Yes.
Um, you said that we should like flip the impact, but don't you think like if both sides are just giving flipping the impact, won't you think it would be very messy debate and it would be like become a very it the
Sorry?
like claim the don't you think it would become a very messy debate and the clash would just become a wash because both sides are just flipping the impacts without really engaging with the other side?
No, but flipping is a form of engagement, right? So you're saying that, so there's a premise, there's a bunch of logic that they provide for why the premise is true, and they have an end impact, right? So they are saying their impact is good. If you say their impact is bad, their impact is harmful, then you say, oh, even if you have reached the end impact, it's not useful because it's actually bad instead of being good. Okay. I mean, you can. It's not like you can do it for every argument. It's not possible to flip the impact. Like something like, I don't know, we save the lives of women cannot be, or we save the lives of human beings cannot be an impact that you can flip. You can't say that, oh, saving the lives of human beings is a bad thing. Okay. I'm saying that is a kind of a rebuttal that you can employ in instances where it is possible to employ that rebuttal. So it's a tool in the toolkit as opposed to being universally applied everywhere. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next question pretty quickly. Then we'll go into some practice. Wait. So yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah. For the assertion rebuttal, you written that don't accuse in vain and that judges don't like uncharitable responses. What do uncharitable responses mean?
Uncharitable responses mean skewing the argument of the other side, going ahead and like lying about the sort of analysis that they have provided. Yeah, just stuff like that.
Okay, so you also had written a superficial analysis, also analysis, and it's acknowledged. Could you just like emphasize on it a bit? I could understand that point.
So, what do you mean by superficial analysis?
Um, not explaining it very clearly.
No, no, like what part are you referring to? Like, I'm a bit unclear.
Of the same part, it's a follow-up question to the assertion one. You had written it in the document.
Okay, okay, okay. Um, it's like if they have so for example, if the logic they have provided is very weak or very bad logic, that does not mean that there exists no logic. So if you have to claim a statement is assertion, then they have provided zero reasons for why that is specifically true, as opposed to a set of or one or two weak reasons for why that is true. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So let more questions? Okay, so let's do practice then. Okay. What I wanted to do is I'll give you a motion right now, and I want you all to think about the kinds of arguments you would run for side opposition for that motion, and then we'll play a prime minister's speech, and we'll think about what are the forms of effective rebuttal that we can employ to that prime minister's speech in itself. Okay. So the motion reads as follows.
Your screen is
By
not
the
visible.
way,
Yeah. I have not shared my screen yet because I want you to think on a motion. Okay, so I'll just share the motion and then I'll give you like 2 minutes to think about it.
can you like share the docs link?
Yeah, I can do that. Wait, I can't open my chat for some reason. Can I open my chat? No, wait, let me rejoin, guys. Never mind, I was muted while speaking. So the motion reads as follows. This House would put an upper age limit of 60 years for individuals running for political office. You've got about 3 to 4 minutes to think about what you could potentially run for opposition. We're not going to discuss it, but that's going to help you in formulating a rebuttal to the Prime Minister's speech.
Please, can you repeat the motion once
It's
again?
there on the chat.
Okay, okay. Oh, sorry, sorry. So
No
sorry.
worries. No, that's fine.
Um, do we have to give rebuttals for government speeches?
Yes. So we're thinking on opposition side, thinking about ideas opposition can run so that we can think of rebuttal to a Prime Minister's speech. Okay, so I think you'll have had enough time to think about opposition. I mean, you can run a bunch of arguments. You can run why this is against the principle of democracy, because democracy means that every individual has a right to represent, um, like whoever section of individuals they feel they want to represent. You can say that why specifically older politicians and more experienced politicians are generally good at their actions. You can talk about how specifically um, if it is a case that they're incompetent, then the electorate will understand that they're incompetent or they're old. There are multiple examples of this happening in the past. For example, when Joe Biden turned very old, there's a lot of pressure internally by people within the Democratic Party, but also his supporters for him to step down from the 2024 um, presidential race. And this was evidenced by the fact that he was not able to perhaps speak as fluently during his campaign speeches or um, put a lot more about of energy as such. And there are other arguments also you can run, which is something that is present on chat. So let's just hear the um, prime minister's speech, and then let's just formulate a bunch of rebuttal that we can present to this. Is my screen visible? Okay. Let me know if you can hear the speech in itself. I hope sharing audio is allowed. I think it is. Let's see. Okay, it's not audible. Okay, if it's not audible, what I'll do is I'll share the link with y'all. You can have a listen to this right now. 1 second. Stop. And then after about 8 minutes, we can go ahead and discuss rebuttal. So yeah. By the way, good stuff on the chat. I think from the people who have written so. Okay, so I presume you've heard the speech in itself. Does someone want to attempt to do some rebuttal? There's some very easy low-hanging fruits in this speech. Any takers? I'll wait for 30 more seconds if there is. Okay, Guhan, do you want to explain that? Why do you think their case is symmetric?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Beautiful. A few things, obviously, I could be wrong, but largely they tell you things like nobody challenges these people. There's a lack of internal accountability. Sure, but external accountability still exists. So, in the end, accountability still exists. I'm really unsure as to why internal accountability matters, since internal accountability is not really transparent and all those sorts of things. I'm just going to make the headlines. We can make it out later. Then they tell you that you do a lot of different things like go to a doctor, Parkinson's doctor, since you're old and stuff like that. It could have been well fleshed out, but on the idea is the idea is if the comparative is younger people, then they have a life, right? They have a life outside politics. If you look at I think the a politician in Italy, I forgot her name, or somewhere in Europe, people kind of dogged on her because she went to parties or stuff like that. But anyways, the comparative with younger politicians, they're going to have life of their own, so they're not going to be dedicating their 24/7 to it. That's also symmetric. Then they tell you that elderly politicians harm discourse. The problem is you are removing their ability to stand as a candidate. You are not removing their ability to be in the party, insofar as their ability is still going to be as a kingmaker within the party, since they have more rep or whatever. They can still they can still pull the strings and do whatever they want, and they clear out the discourse, right? So that is also hugely symmetric. Then we can just go ahead and be a op case, which I
Yeah,
assume.
that's quite a good quality rebuttal. I think the one thing you want to be a bit more careful about is like I think you have a bit of a tendency to not fully state the observation and just like state a few words that they have said in it. So I would advise you to like go ahead and like do the exact quote and say that we feel this is untrue. This logic is untrue because of the reason. But your logic is quite good. Yeah, Jayant, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not really sure whether this rebuttal is a great one, but proposition comes up here and tries to tell us that this lack of internal accountability. Now, there are two very important points here. First of all, that they pin up lack of internal accountability to a person who's old. But even if a person who comes from a political background and has been into politics since birth, because they're from a political family, caste system, and all that, as it happens very prevalently in India, still they have that much of political advantage, and still there's lack of internal accountability. So really talking about an old leader coming up, such like the new Nepali interim prime minister, which has no really role in politics, has still internal accountability because age does not directly pin up to internal accountability. And secondly, and much more importantly here, is that the very fact that when the only reason they give us that old age can be linked to internal accountability because they have been in politics for long and because they know how to control the strings, because they already know the game, is the very fact that if they have the effort enough and if they have the mental and physical ability enough to pull the strings, to know the game, to remain their influence, probably they have the mental and physical capability to remain in office as well. Because as we know that internal politics in the party itself, especially in big democracies like United States of America, Joe Biden, as they were continuously giving the example. Now, if Joe Biden is capable enough of winning the democratic people's minds and hearts and souls, if Joe Biden is capable enough of controlling the power in Democratic Party itself, I believe that mentally and like all about their old age in itself, he's capable enough of being in power, right? And doing their job correctly, right?
Yep.
If a person just ends up dumb in front of a political when they're in power and still people vote him in, it's the problem of the electorate in general. And democracy is a representation of the electorate, not really something which is good in general. So that's a contradicting argument.
Good. So yeah, I mean, I think you're correct here. Like, so the idea is just like, well, if it's the case that these leaders are incompetent, then it is likely to be the case that they would be voted out by the electorate either way. So it's not really clear why specifically is that a reason why we should prohibit them from standing in the election. Um, so then I'll just give you an illustration in itself of a broad, holistic form of rebuttal that you can provide to the speech. So you could be like, proposition have two broad claims, which is true, they don't have more than two. The first claim is politicians pose a huge risk to electoral politics. And the second is this motivates young people to now get engaged more with electoral politics. Let's respond to the first claim. So there are a few reasons why they state why politicians pose a risk. We're going to explain to you why none of those reasons hold true. But even if those reasons hold true to some extent, this does not reach the tipping point for them to claim that you should absolutely ban individuals above 60 from contesting elections, but rather go ahead and take countermeasures to ensure that the issues that they create in itself may be mitigated as such. Um, what am I doing? This is the observation part of it, right? So I'm saying that I'll do a direct rebuttal, but I'm also saying that um, even if you feel that the rebuttal in itself is mitigatory, I have a second pathway. My second pathway is just saying that this does not lead the second form of rebuttal. This does not reach the tipping point for banning some individual as such. So let's look at the first form of rebuttal. So let's now go to the explanation part, okay? The first reason why they say politicians pose a risk is because it is very likely that they win and get established in every political system and election because of their experience. We are unclear why this is a specifically bad thing, given experience is a key part of formation of who a politician is, and individuals vote other individuals and trust other individuals based on their experience, which is an important factor in electoral politics. The second reason that they say is, well, it is the case that they are old and as a result of which cannot do stuff and would be caring about other things like their health. This is untrue because of the reason that, because of two reasons. The first reason is um, maybe it's no, the first reason is just like this is only true for the most senior politicians or politicians suffering from like diseases as such, right, is not true for all individuals above 60. But the second reason would be like even if it is the case that they have some time that they have to spend on this, other individuals below 60 may also have health issues. Other individuals below 60 may have other priorities in life, like family. Somebody previously also said this. Um, and on the comparative, may be the case that they are making up from the loss of time with the experience that they are providing, or with the resources that they are providing, or the just the ability to take good quality decisions in itself, which is why they've been voted in. So we don't feel this reaches a tipping point for them being banned. And the third is quite simply this harms discourse because this crowds it out in a way that would be harmful, but they don't really give you any explanation in terms of what sort of harmful discourse do older politicians propagate. The reasons they provide are common to politicians at large in terms of them trying to steerhead discourse in their own specific ways, and hence is not a reason why you should ban politicians above 60. So we have taken down the entire argument that politicians pose a risk. The second argument now is on younger people coming out and voting in itself. Um, so the only reasons that it provides why young people will come out and vote is Perhaps if they do not see older politicians on the ballot and they see younger politicians on the ballot, they may be incentivized to come out and vote. This is untrue. The first reason is, even if it's the case you ban individuals above 60, given this is a trend by your own analysis, people closer to 60 or people in their 50s would then be elected or be in positions of power. So, by your logic, um, younger people will not be mobilized because anyway it is individuals above 50 who are coming to power. But the second and the more holistic response in this instance could be, there are other reasons why younger individuals are apathetic to politics and do not come out to vote. There are reasons like they feel establishment politics has destroyed the way in which our democracy operates, and the kinds of choices that they have between, like, say, a Kamala Harris and a Joe Biden is, sorry, not a Joe Biden, my bad, and a Donald Trump is not a legitimate choice because they are having to choose between the lesser of two evils, and the fact that they do not have any individual politician who they believe represents their interests. Um, yeah, so there are other reasons why they don't come out and vote. Maybe it's the case that they don't care as much about electoral politics, for which government provides zero reasons why they would now start to care about electoral politics. So yeah, these are two forms of rebuttal. These are two rebuttals that you can provide to either to each of these arguments. Um, and yeah, that's all for the session today. If you have any questions, you can ask. If not, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some on rebuttals. Can you tell me the difference between a counter argument and a rebuttal and an even if rebuttal?
So
Sorry,
counter
direct rebuttal, counter argument, and even if.
so counter argument would be like it's an argument on the same clash, which is for your side. So for example, if there's a clash about benefiting women, and Gulf makes an argument about ways in which they can benefit women, um, and you make a counter argument being like our side also has different ways in which they can benefit women, that's a counter argument. Is that responsive to the government's arguments? Yes, in a way it is, because they give you a bunch of positive reasons why something can be achieved. You give a bunch of reasons why the same thing can be achieved in your side, but in different ways. This does not take down their argument. It's not rebuttal in any way. It's a counter argument. You can use your counter argument to weigh against the other team's argument in itself, which is a way in which you can then beat out the other team. Um, in terms of what is the second thing you said? I forgot. What's the
Can you
second
give
thing you
an
want?
example? I have two question follow-ups. So first I asked about even if, and the second I just want to
Oh,
ask, can you give an example of counter?
even if would be offering different forms of rebuttals, which we did in this instance, right? So we said that I don't know, like uh, I will take down your mechanisms, but even if that is not true, even if your mechanisms are true, as you're talking about the first argument, uh, these mechanisms are not reasons enough to ban politicians. So this is two different rebuttals. One rebuttal, you're completing the rebuttal and being like, even if you do not believe me, then there is another rebuttal I'm providing. So it's a statement used to provide multiple forms of rebuttals in itself. Yeah, questions?
Yeah, I have a question, sir. So I wanted to ask that you said that counter arguments are only to be provided within a clash. So is that so the case that a counter argument is only to be provided by the web speaker since he's the one that gives the clash? Also, like you said that you have to also like provide a lot of weighing mechanism within it. So how do we exactly go by that?
Okay, so your whip cannot provide counter arguments for the simple reason that counter arguments are not responses. Counter arguments are like constructive arguments you're making in your speech. So it has to be provided by the first or second speaker.
So,
Uh,
like if I'm
yeah,
not wrong, so
mhm.
the third speaker gives a bit of clashes, right? So when he or she is giving a clash, then like is he or she not supposed to give counter arguments within it, as you said that we're supposed to add within
So
a clash?
so whip can give rebuttal, whip can give weighing, whip can't do counter arguments. Um, but as far as clashes are concerned, clashes exist independent of whether or not the whips derive those clashes in itself. Okay, so there are general clashes in the debate. The whips just use a clash structure in 3v3 debating, or maybe even BP debating, to describe how the debate went across. It isn't like necessary that only the whip speaker may divide the debate into clashes. The second speaker can also do so. It depends on the way in and the style in which you're specifically debating. What was the second question? Did you have a second question?
Yeah, so I was asking that, like, do we also have to weigh things in a counter argument since it's being like it's
Yes,
a reply
yes.
to some other argument?
So when you're providing a counter argument, you are not rebutting the other team's argument, right? You're providing like other reasons why you can achieve the same impact. So then you just weigh why your the way in which you achieve the impact is perhaps stronger or better or more impactful in the way they achieve their impact. Um, Now, if you ask me how, weighing is another entire session in itself. But if you ask me to give you a video, there's a good video by Nico Wittig, who's a good debater. I should write his name on chat. He has a YouTube channel. You can check. Okay. Guhan, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, more of a meta question and not in terms of rebuttals itself. I'm finding it a bit difficult. You were right to say that I picked words apart. I tend to uh, go house by house or argument by argument or sentence by sentence. The problem with that is simply put word economy, right? How do I do theme by theme rebuttals? Like I know that what's to say, exercises and practices are the way, but no matter how much I think I'm not able to come up with practices to practice my word economy. So I think at least for me, in order to get better at rebuttal, I need to get better at word economy. So any tips on how to get better at it? Because theme by theme rebuttals, I feel, is just a lot more high quality.
Okay, no, so you have to define what you mean by word economy here, because to my understanding, word economy is just the ability to express an idea in lesser amount of time with a lot of clarity. So, like, if, for
No, yeah,
example, yeah,
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 e-
go
e-
for it.
exactly that, right? Instead of okay, in terms of rebuttals, simply put, how do I become better at theme by theme rebuttals rather than pick and choose kind of rebuttals, or rather than argument by argument rebuttal?
So I think the first thing is you I mean you must rebut arguments that is relevant to your strategy. So in BP debating, obviously a lot of teams have arguments, and in fact you cannot rebut the argument that your opening has made if you're a whip in itself, right? Um, so like you employ weighing quite simply. You weigh your arguments versus the other team's arguments. Um, but the simple idea is just this, okay? um, think about debating in forms of impacts. And if it is a principal argument, obviously there's a different way in which you deal with the principal argument, which I guess Pranav did take a session a few days back in. Um, so
Hmm.
yeah, um, so if it's just about impacts, right? We like think about, okay, what are the impacts they are proving? Okay, and broadly there will be at least two or three impacts that each team is providing, and try to think about what are the things you need to do in order to ensure you beat those impacts using your case. Um, so you have an impact, they have an impact. The ideal version would be you rebut all their impacts. Okay, so either you flip the impact or you rebut a premise that leads to the impact, or you rebut the mechanisms, whatever it's the case, right? um, And in that case, you automatically win because you rebutted all their positive material and you have some positive material, right? But that's not always possible because, well, there's a lot of arguments in a round, and there are four speeches, 28 minutes of material that you have to respond to. So what you'd want to do is you want to select, okay, I'm going to rebut one of the arguments, and then I'm going to ensure I do a weighing against their team as well, okay, the impact as well, to ensure that you don't need to holistically do rebuttal to everything, but you're doing rebuttal to those specific arguments that or impacts that you feel is necessary in order to ensure that you're able to weigh your arguments satisfactorily against the other team's arguments as such, which is a easier version of attempting to carve yourself a pathway of victory.
All right, so basically prioritizing my rebuttals, right?
Yep, yep,
Keep
yep.
them. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I mean, if you're like, how do I get better at this? Like, I mean, I would say take a LO speech or take a DPM
Mm.
speech, like practice, prep a motion 15 minutes, uh, watch a video debate of good quality, maybe HWS round robin or something of that sort. Watch the PM speech, do an LO speech, focus on your rebuttal, go back to the video debate, hear the rebuttal that the actual speaker has provided in the debate as well. Reference your rebuttal versus their rebuttal. You can
Mm.
similar to it for the TPM position as well, wherein you record your speech, you hear your speech, you self analyze your rebuttal, but you also go ahead and hear better quality versions of it, which gives you a reference point to what you're aspiring to.
All right, that okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense.
No
Thank you.
worries. Okay, any other questions?
Yes. There's one confirmation that essentially said that counter arguments are other reasons why you can achieve the same impact as the other team does. So
Hmm.
basically, just to confirm if I'm what I'm understanding is correct, counter arguments is just to reduce the legitimacy of your opponent's arguments, but not really fulfilling your motion burdens per se, right?
I mean, it is fulfilling your motions burdens because you're like stating another positive argument on your side. Uh, and as a result of doing so, you're also saying that opposition, the other team's argument or the other team's impact is not unique, right? Because you have also provided a bunch of reasons why you can achieve the impact. So if that's the case, it's competing. You have analysis and they have analysis. Both the analysis is competing against one another. And the only way to resolve it is either you rebut all of their mechanisms or you weigh your mechanisms versus their
Yeah,
mechanisms.
okay, got it. That, but the second question, one more, is regarding the practice technique you gave right now, like checking up a video and doing it like that. But if you like the second speaker,
Hmm.
so the PM's constructive and their interpretation is going to be different. So do you need to match yours as a TPM to it, or you can just like go ahead?
No, I mean it's fine. You can hear the PM and then you can think about, oh, they have this case, but the in this instance you're trying to do rebuttal, right?
Okay.
You're trying to see how effective your rebuttal would be. And obviously it's the case that maybe the DPM in the debate has different rebuttal to the intended rebuttal that you have, which is perfectly fine. Maybe member of government or government whip has better rebuttal. It depends on the debate, obviously, okay?
Hmm.
And like there is no formula to it, but obviously it's like good practice. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you so much.
no worries. If y'all want a drill sheet, I can share one on the chat here.
Yeah, and then
Give
talk.
me a
It will help a lot, if
yeah, yeah,
possible.
of course. Let me do that. So there's a bunch of drills that was set up by um, the EUDC Edge core from this year, which is very useful, very good. Um, Sent it on the chat right now. Okay. And the doc from today, right? Let me see. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I send it on the chat as well.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, thanks guys. Thank you for joining in. And good luck for the tournament.